Welcome to today's session on raising HR profile externally and internally. I'm so delighted that you've all joined the call today, and if you're listening on catch up, that you've been able to listen in as well. Today's session is something that's very close to my heart and also Kay, my co-host today. We've designed this specifically for HR leaders based on the observations that we're both having of the changing landscape of the HR world. So really hope that you walk away from today's session with a little bit of a Friday inspiration, some really tangible tips, and that we can all learn from each other. So without further ado, I think what we'll do is we'll introduce myself and Kay as our co-host for today, and then we'll get cracking. Kay, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Kay Phelps. I run a business called PR in HR, and we've been working in the HR sector for about 30 years now. And our role is specifically, we don't tend to work directly with HR people. We tend to work with HR brands, and we try and get those brands into the media. So we do that day in, day out. So we're working with journalists all the time. So we have some really good ideas on how the media, how journalists work. And so that's what we want to kind of present and help you with today.
Thanks, Kay. And it's going to be fantastic having both of our perspectives internally and externally. So my name's Sally Pritchett. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Something Big. We're a creative communications agency and work with large organisations for about the last 25 years on their communications specifically. We help them engage their customers, investors, and very much so, and particularly in the last 5 years to decade, their employees. So what I've really noticed is that having started my career mainly working with marketing directors and also being on a client side as well, like yourselves, working in a business, in the last decade or so, I've worked increasingly with HR directors, and today's session is really born out of the observations that I'm starting to see and some of the challenges those HR leaders are having. So I'm really so happy that this has resonated with so many of you, and you've had some lovely comments to say to me about this coming on this call. So to kick us off, what we're going to do, I thought, is set the scene a little bit. And Kay, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for you to tell us what the reputation and sort of landscape is of the HR world. Oh, sorry, forgot to do that slide. It's going well already, Kay. So yeah, tell us what the media thinks the landscape of HR is all about.
If you can flick to the next slide as well, that'd be great. There we go. So Sally and I were talking the other day, and we were saying, there's the old saying of sticks and stones may break my bones, and, words will never hurt me. But actually, words really, really do hurt. And when you see that you've got publications like the FT, Raconteur, which is a Times publication, the Telegraph, HR publications as well, saying that HR isn't great, what's the impact of that? In our view, that lack of respect, that narrative results in HR not only often being a thankless task, but it's more severely, it's about underfunding. And so we're not saying you personally have a poor reputation, far, far, far from it. We're saying this is outside of your control, and FDs, CEOs, employees, they're all listening to this narrative. In fact, I found some research from Cezanne, the software company, that they did with HR Ninja, and they found that 83% of HR people believe that HR is suffering from a tarnished reputation. That same survey found that 54% of HR professionals rarely or never receive recognition for their efforts. And then if you take that on further, we found some Gartner research as well that for last year, it showed that the average HR functional spend as a percentage of business revenue is 0.76%. You need information how that works alongside other support functions, but it is one of the lowest investments that a business makes. Other support functions spend, finance is 1.30%, IT 3.25%, marketing is 7.5%, and sales is 4.37%. And so realistically, I mean, why should marketing get 7.5% when HR doesn't even get 1%? Other research, Advisor Plus, which is one of our customers at PR and HR, they found in a survey late last year that tech is underfunded. They're actually an employee relations technology. But they found that 47% of large businesses, that's 1,000 employees plus, still use.
Oh. Oh, Kay, you've gone on to mute.
Try again.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That was a bit strange. Keep an eye on that because I haven't pressed a thing. So
okay, no worries.
So did you get that the 1,000+ companies are using spreadsheets for for employee relations, or should I do that again?
Yeah, just do that again, because I think all of this is really fascinating, that we're basically hearing HR underfunding, other departments not so much.
Correct. And so one specific example, Advisor Plus, which is an employee relations technology company, they found that 47% of large businesses, that's 1,000+ employees, still use spreadsheets for their employee relations. So it's kind of crazy. Also, we found Fortune, the big publication, found in 2023 HR budgets decreased by 25%. And in 2022, that figure was 12%. So HR budgets are going the wrong way. Stagnation is also an issue. And I think that takes you on to some really interesting stuff you wanted to say, Sally.
It does. And almost like a gift to me last night was to see a headline come in from an email I got from the IPA, which is the Association for the Advertising Industry. And I'm going to read you the headline, because I think we all need to feel the pain of this today, because this is kind of the crux of why I wanted to run this call. But the headline on this email from IPA last night was UK marketing budget growth remains strong amid positive 2024 and 2025 outlook. So I don't want to make you all feel terrible here, but your colleagues in other departments are not suffering the same budget constraints as you are in HR. And this is one of the main sort of kind of parts of my frustration and one of the problems I wanted to solve. And I really want to draw out this, and again, maybe this is the roller coaster element of this session. We start with the challenge, but I want to talk about this dropping, decreasing, reducing resource that we have, this underfunding, and it is amid the challenge of what I see is a massively growing remit and responsibility in HR. So I think I can't tell everybody that's on the call, but I know that a very wise HR leader that we work with may well be on the call. So I'm going to steal this from her, because I think this is something that really resonated when she told me this kind of little story once. And she said, in my early career, I really felt as an HR leader that I looked at the 10%. And this was the 10% at the bottom who were poor performing or being a bit naughty and they needed an intervention, discipline, whatever it might be. And the 10% at the top of my organisation who were my high flyers, my rising stars, and they needed retention strategies and promotions, etc. And she said that over the course of my career has moved to taking responsibility for the whole workforce. We're talking workplace culture, diversity and inclusion. We're trying to make inclusive workplaces. We're increasing belonging. We're working on psychological safety. We're working on health and well-being. We're working on engaging the workforce in the purpose that we have and for our organisation and creating meaningful work. We're managing talent acquisition and creating compelling employer brands and EVPs. We're navigating hybrid working, and this is often in a place, and this isn't going to stop this list. You can hear that I'm on a rant, right? Mm-hmm. But we're working on hybrid working, but often in a place where we've got a really split workforce. It might be field-based, they might be remote workers, place-based people, as well as desk-based. And hybrid means a very different thing for all of those different groups. So that is not an easy project on its own. We're driving the best possible employee experience from end to end, and everybody's going, well, what's happening at this part of the experience and that part, etc. This isn't something we dealt with 3 decades ago. We're driving retention because we're beating this ongoing talent war, or we're trying to keep up with this talent war, which is a challenge for everyone because we have got more people leaving the workplace than we have joining because of the aging workforce. So we're up against it. We're identifying skills gaps that the education system hasn't supported us on because it didn't know 20 years ago what skills we would require in our businesses. And so we're having to manage that as well. We're navigating a widening age gap in our workplaces. So we're talking about multi-generational workplaces, but we are talking Gen Z. What do they need from us and want from us versus our baby boomers or our Gen X? We're preparing the organisation for the future of work in this AI-enabled world that we don't know what that even looks like. We're also still supporting our executive development teams, our executive teams to be the leaders, the authentic, vulnerable, story sharing leaders. We've replaced the ivory tower with glass walls, and we're saying, no, actually, I need to support you to be this authentic leader. So that list could go on, actually. And I think, as I've said it, you've probably gone, oh, yeah. And in my business, I've also got these very specific things. You might be doing a transformation. You might be doing a reorg. You might be making redundancies. You might be changing an entire divisional setup. There is an inordinate iceberg under that bit that we refer to. So to do that on the backdrop of reducing budgets is kind of criminal. I hope I've cheered you all up. Don't worry. By the end of the call, we will have cheered you up, because I think the first thing we really wanted to do is acknowledge that problem. So what we have is an external, uncontrolled by you and unable for you to be uncontrollable, external reputation that is impacting your profile and reputation and budgets and resources internally. And then you've got that on the backdrop of this growing remit. You're not alone. And that is why there's lots of people on this call today. So you're not alone. And the way that we want to tackle this today is we're going to start off by sharing a couple of stories that Kay and I have. So Kay's got a story of a particular individual, an HR leader. He can't be with us because the stork is, as we speak, I believe, delivering a brand new baby to him. So Kay will share his individual story of how he raised his profile, and he's very kindly shared all his tips. And then I'm going to share the story of a marketing team that doubled their budgets and increased their resource and their team, so that we can just take any inspiration we possibly can from these two stories, because I'm a communicator, so I can't help but always start with stories. So Kay, over to you, and I will change the slide. Oh, sorry, I'm really not keeping up with the slides today. So my point here is today's call is the circuit breaker. That's why Kay and I chatted over coffee and went, you know what we need to do? We need to help these HR leaders and create a bit of a circuit breaker. So Kay, do you want to tell us Idris's story?
Now it's my turn.
Now it's your turn.
So Idris Arshad is a fantastic example of creating change for himself and promoting himself. As Sally says, he'd be here right now if it wasn't for babies arriving. But I do recommend you follow him on LinkedIn. He's superb, and you'll see, I actually was even interested in how he describes himself on LinkedIn. He describes himself as an HR expert and a chartered MCIPD. He also describes himself as a commentator in HR publications, and then he puts his job role, which is a people and inclusion partner, at a charity called St. Christopher's. But he recognized, I didn't ask him when it started, but certainly within a few years ago, he recognized he had long-term career goals, and he felt like he was starting at ground zero. Nobody knew of him. But he also saw LinkedIn as a massive opportunity with 1 billion people globally to build an audience and a community. So many of you will know LinkedIn well, use it frequently. So I'll just go through Idris's what route that he's used so that you can draw any examples you can or any good ideas from him. So He's now got nearly 4,000 followers, and that keeps rising. He's become an influencer. People want to know what he's talking about. And I think personally, being active on LinkedIn is almost like being it's almost like a career cushion. You're creating a network and a community for career growth, or if your career suddenly needs some help as well, you've got people around you. I think too, it's like, what they say about planting a tree. It's when's the best time to start doing that? It was 20 years ago, but when's the second best time to do it? It's now. But back to Idris, his posts on LinkedIn have generated so much interest in his work and his views. He's been invited on podcasts, he's been a speaker at events, he's a regular media commentator now. And so he's regularly quoted in the HR publications. Editors and journalists go to him for his views. And they won't be his company views. It's always about Idris being an expert rather than the company that he works for. Excuse me, let's change papers. So he's meeting now people in different worlds that he would never have met otherwise. And he's amplified his voice. It's now highly credible externally and internally. So we love what Idris has done. And like I said, he'd be a really great person to follow, and I'm sure would welcome connections and helping as well. So he did have some tips for us as well. And it's all about, for him, like he said, audience and community. He didn't know he was going to become a HR magazine commentator. But start with LinkedIn. Post regularly. Regularly is really important, and shape your opinion and your style. I asked him if that came easily at first, and he said absolutely not. It did not. He needed to really work on that, but it started to become second nature after a little while. It's really important to create your own voice. He said in an organization, you're tied to the rules and the culture, but outside of it, it's possible to post HR commentary and provide guidance from a non-organizational perspective. And you'll see he does that really well. Keep it human. He had some really nice advice on another way that LinkedIn helps organizations, actually. He said people buy from people, but using LinkedIn to boost employer brand is good and very underutilized. So get your employees to be your brand ambassadors, posting jobs and content and amplifying your messages. He had I'm just going to apologize a second. I've got a very elderly and poorly dog in the background. So if you can suddenly hear some noises, that's him. So he's doing it quite quietly at the moment, but it might get noisier. So forgive me if he starts. He said as well, be prepared for feedback. If you're calling things out, be prepared that people will have different opinions and may challenge you. So be ready to defend and justify your messages and your views. He also said that some organizations may not like what you have to say about certain topics, so just be cautious. You've got to be sensible. Riley said selfies and photos help algorithms, but it's not his style. So do as you please there. And like I said, do follow and connect with Idris for inspiration. He's really a good follow. And I think, that's all I've got about Idris. Sally, over to you in your marketing. Oh, can't hear you.
Nice. This is going well today. We're really seamless, Kay. I'm following Idris, and I love connecting with people that are speaking up on LinkedIn, and I personally love LinkedIn myself. Now, I know that from a corporate point of view, and when it comes to HR specifically, we often worry about the difference between our personal views and the views of our organisation. So I think it is really important to get that straight on your LinkedIn profile and refer to things that are being your personal views and things like that. And also just being aware of the organisation that you're, working within, and what are the things that are risk averse within that. So I get that this is a difficult ask. Okay, I want to take you on a different journey. I want to talk about a team and a function and a story that still sits really well with me. It's a story from about a decade ago, and it took us a few years, and I'm going to tell you a story on it. What's really interesting about this is obviously we've just heard about the sort of marketing budgets and how they've raised marketing functions have kind of raised their profile. But let's just remember a decade ago, marketing departments were actually often called the colouring in department. They were seen as a cost, they were seen as fluffy, they were seen as not commercial, not making a strategic contribution to the business, etc. So put yourselves back in that, because I'm going to tell you about a story. So a very good friend and client of ours about 10 years ago took on a new role as a marketing director at a large organisation. He was new to the organisation, so he was kind of new to the whole culture. And very quickly, he figured out that his team were, first of all, very under-resourced. There were just not enough bodies within his team. They had very tight budgets, and the morale of this team that he picked up was pretty low. So he started talking to them about, who was responsible for what and what budgets did they have. And there was an awful lot of sort of eye rolling and, wishing him luck in getting the budgets that he was talking about, or being able to use external agencies like he wanted to, or do some of the projects that he was talking about. And they said, other departments, like, there's this initiative going on over there in the business and they're spending all this money, but we just don't get this money here. So he and I chatted, amongst other things, about all the different things that they were struggling with, including their morale as a team, but also their reputation and profile within the business and their sort of stakeholder management. And one of the things he asked me to do was to come along and sort of help facilitate a bit of a team meeting. And part of that was to provide a bit of an external cushion to let them kind of let rip and just get it all out and have a bit of a therapy session. And in that session, I asked them quite early on in the session, if I were to ask anyone in the wider business, what is the role of marketing within this organization, what would they say? And this kind of garnered responses like, well, the marketing department, make flyers, they manage events, they send customer emails, they manage our social media channels, or and the worst one that upset them the most, shall we say, was, and they're responsible for the cupboard, the sacred cupboard. And I was like, what's this cupboard that they're talking about? Oh, well, it's where we have all the branded sort of merch. It's like if you need a branded pen, that the market, you have to go through the gatekeepers of the marketing department. So really the thing they were most famous for was all this tactical nonsense stuff, right? So we went on to discuss where was this reputation coming from, who was giving them the least kind of credibility, who was really referring to them as the colouring in department or the branded pen department. And this is where the bitterness started coming out. And they were like, well, it's the sales teams, it's horrendous. They just don't get what we're doing, and they're celebrating all these great deals and these customers that they're winning, but they just don't notice that actually we acquired the lead, we found the prospect, we nurtured them in marketing. So I kind of kept poking, and I started talking about impact, which is a big thing for me to talk about, the difference between impact and output. Output being the stuff we do, impact obviously being the strategic contribution we make. And this is where they really got upset, because they said, well, once a year, there's this enormous annual kind of sales conference, and it's really flashy, and all the salespeople get to go, and they all get awards for all their wonderful work that they've been doing, bringing in all their fantastic new customers that we brought in through marketing. And if we're really lucky, we get to kind of muscle in and sit at the back, but nobody gives us any acknowledgement within that sales conference. Anyway, so we were starting at ground zero, it's fair to say, in this story. And so without taking you through every step of the journey, essentially what I diagnosed at that point was we've got a massive reputation and profile issue within the business. Nobody understands what marketing does or is the contribution it's making. And I sort of prescribed a journey, which we then went on, myself and the marketing director and that team. And some of the stuff we did, I won't tell you everything, but the first thing I have to tell you that I got them to do is I said, well, my first sort of prescription for you is that what you're going to do is you're going to offer the sales director that you're going to now run the sales conference. As you can imagine, this went down like a lead balloon. And I did this on purpose because, of course, it's highly inappropriate to have a sales conference that doesn't acknowledge the contribution of marketing. So our starting point was to actually offer up our services and be part of this event and the narrative of it. So not only did we get to run it, but we started to be capable of being part of the narrative that was being shared, etc. And I will come back to that event in a minute. But that was one of the first things I recommended. The other things I recommended, though, is that we create an elevator pitch about impact, not about output, as to how do we all describe what the marketing team does. We're going to create our own impact sort of elevator pitch, and we're all going to learn it, and we're all going to sing off the same hymn sheet every single time, so that when we're communicating with the wider business, we all say the same thing. We're also going to talk an awful lot more about impact rather than output. We then did other things, like we started responding to requests in a different way. We put processes in place for certain requests. So we sort of downplayed the I want a branded pen or I want a flyer. We made that a very tactical, easy thing. We got some people to self-serve some of these easy things so that they became smaller in the scheme of things. Meanwhile, we did, and I think the biggest thing we did is we set about an education journey. So that education was everybody from junior to senior. We found every single opportunity, from onboarding and inducting new salespeople right from the outset, all the way through to talking to the board, talking at regional events, etc., all the time educating everyone in the wider business. I just want to tell you what really kind of happened next. So if I cut to the chase, 3 years later, during the the sales and marketing annual conference, the CEO, who had used to present awards to the sales teams, absolutely, the CEO presented the marketing team with his own internal award that he created of his own volition, the Marketing Team of the Year award. And this was an award that he created and went and did a speech about. And that was for their contribution to their strategic marketing and brand journey. So this was the recognition that team went from a colouring in department. But by the time we got to that point, which was 3 years later, the team had grown like more than double. And we had very, very different job titles as well. It's really important to note. We had much more strategic job titles. We had external consultants, including myself, but also other consultancies working on really strategic client intimacy projects and things like that. We had the sales team always referring to the marketing team to get strategic insights before they were going and doing their customer meetings. And we even had salespeople talking to marketing people about coming to customer meetings. So we were in a really massively different place. And by the way, no one was talking about the cupboard anymore and the sort of branded pen or the flyers. So the moral of my story is it will take time and it is a journey, but you are in way more control of your reputation and your profile than you think you are. And if we sit in that victim seat of like, nobody gets HR, we're just the downtrodden, and we don't manage our narrative within the business, then we are unfortunately going to continue to get these like lower budgets and things like that, which is going to be really difficult. start with that slide for you and let you crack on.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'll give an overview first of what media relations is, and I think most of you will know exactly what it is, but it's actually basically it's about working with journalists, and because journalists, especially in this market, because it's buzzing, and as Sally went through all of those different topics, you know, in a few slides ago, HR journalists have a lot to write about, and they have a lot of expertise they need to glean, and from others. And where do they get that from? They get that from people like you. They like having different opinions. They like having guidance from HR experts, the people who are experiencing the problems and know some guidance and expertise and things they can convey to help others. So why is it really good to do media relations? It's because getting your expertise recognized by trusted journalists, by doing that, you actually amplify your personal brand exponentially to audiences you may never have known otherwise. Basically, it gives you clout. It makes you highly credible, more recognized and trusted. And we've done some research at PR and HR, and recognition and trust are huge in the HR sector. It's really important for all of us to feel like we're working with people we know, or, you know, and so media relations can help you do that. It says something about your work and your expertise. Next, and it's so it'd be working with all those sorts of publications, but I'll go on to that in a little bit more. So, getting started. Again, there's no quick wins here, usually. But what would be really important to get started is choose your success stories or your topics of expertise. There'll be things that you have a passion for and a thing that you really want to sort out and solve, and you want to talk about. Could be DEI, ESG, how you've helped employees with financial education, with the cost of living issues. Could be well-being. It could be how you work with your progressing your career as a CPO, conversations with a C-suite, pay and reward. There's so many different things that you might be really, you find is really important to you personally, and work that you're really proud of. So I would gather what you want to talk about first and what your expertise is first. The next thing I would say is you've got to bear in mind the corporate rules, and you'll know all about policies, and there will be policies about media and social media. And that's quite right and quite necessary. Some organizations will be very risk averse, and you will have to be very careful how you do this. Others will be like, yes, please, we want to hear about the good employer stories. We want to promote them. So find out where your company is on doing anything with social media and media. And then talk to your press or your communications team if you have one. Press and comms teams are likely to be wary is not the right word, but they'll be careful. They want to be putting the company across in the right light. So they will be, some of them will, very big organizations will be wary that you're kind of saying, okay, let's get us in a local or a sector publication. They might instantly be thinking Newsnight or Sun, you know, danger, you know, what dangerous thing is this going to get us into? But from experience, HR media isn't like that. HR media is all about education. It's all about guiding other people through issues they might experience. So it's not really, you always have to be careful, but it's not really a dangerous type of media to work with. So brief your corporate comms team, let them know about how the HR media works and give them some examples of how the HR media works. And see if they can help you. Some of them might be very willing to help you do this. I would also very much monitor the HR media, understand what topics are being discussed, and which topics are going to be really good for your personal brand, and the corporate brand. find out and think it really through whether discussing something will enhance your reputation and show your expertise, and consider what perspective and guidance you might bring on a certain topic. So out of all those topics that could be discussed, is there something that a HR magazine editor will have said something and you think, well, I really agree with that, or hang on, they missed a point, or is there something else we can bring to the story? HR journalists are always looking to move a story 2% onwards. So if you've seen something in the media and you think there's something missing from that, that's actually a really good opportunity for you to contact that journalist and say, actually, you wrote this really great article, but have you considered this perspective? Or have you considered the how we could actually give more guidance on this? And journalists like that. They want to hear your voices. So yeah, monitor that media, figure out what they're all talking about, and figure out what you can add to the conversation. I think we're going to the next slide. Yes, next slide, please. It doesn't happen easily. Proactivity is vital. Pinpoint which publications you respect and would like to work with. There are many in our sector: HR Magazine, People Management, Personnel Today, Training Zone. Then you can go into Workplace Wellbeing Professional, a Mad World, Make a Difference. There are so many different publications, and so find out which ones you want to think you'd like to work with. Then locate their editors. Most of them you'll be easily find them on the websites, or look at the publication and see who's writing. You'll see the journalists listed out. I would then connect with those journalists on LinkedIn, especially X or Twitter as well, but I feel like LinkedIn is definitely the best place these days. Connect with them, share their stories, add guidance to their stories, comment on their stories. That'll start you getting you noticed by them, which is a really good thing. You're going to start forming some really nice relationships. Then do what Idris did as well, Idris Arshad, and actually post your views, your own views and guidance on what's going on at the market at the moment. For instance, there was some news earlier on today that came out in the Nationals, which is all about the Prime Minister going to change the rules on GPs and the GPs issuing sick notes. So this came out in the Times, it came out in the Daily Mail and the BBC. What you'll find from that, because it's been in the national press early this morning, the HR sector press will cover that ASAP. How we work that as a PR agency is we have a wellbeing director who knows all about this discussion, and he gave us our commentary. We got that to some publications, some editors this morning, and it's already come out in their articles today. So we've just given them an easy way of, here's some expertise, you can use this in your publications and your articles, and then we've got our clients some nice coverage. And so that raises their trust and recognition and respect and all those lovely things. So although we've done that for a company, there's no reason you as individuals cannot do that as well. So building relationships with the HR publication journalists is super important, so they know who you are, what you're all about, what your favorite topics are, what you can talk about. We on the PR and HR LinkedIn website, we often post what journalists are looking for as articles. So if you follow us, we can share ideas for you. So and that is, if we've shared, so for instance, this morning, I think it was HR World, off the top of my head, the editor there was looking for a CHRO to talk about culture transformation. So we can put you in touch with people like that. If you're somebody who knows that's your subject matter expertise and you want to talk to them, we can put you in touch. That's no problem at all. So absolutely reach out to us and we'll help where we can. And definitely, if you've got views you want to share with a journalist, message them, email them. They are I'll give you a little story. Years ago, I used to work in technology PR, and it did not fit my personality type at all. It was really aggressive, kind of angry. Journalists would just kind of like, just what? and that's not my style. I luckily found HR, and journalists are a really collaborative bunch. They want to hear your views. They want to hear what's different. They want to know, what are the employer issues right now? What are the employee issues right now? And how are those being solved? So if you can bring that to them and you can move their story 2% onwards, they're going to like having conversations with you. So they are busy. They might not respond to everything you send to them, but yeah, they will appreciate your views. And the last thing I'd say is, when you've got really good employer stories. So for instance, the lady I spoke to in the breakout session, and she was mentioning about the male leadership decreasing from 90 to 60%, whatever it was. That's a really interesting story. It'd be really interesting to dive into that, to find out how that's happened, what impact is happening with there, how HR has made that work. So get that sort of information to journalists. They might be really interested in covering it. And when you have those stories, that makes really good information for awards, which Sally and I are both very keen on.
Passionate about. Brilliant,
Yes.
Kay. I love that. And I love listening to the idea that, yes, connecting with journalists. I certainly know that I was in touch with a journalist on a specific topic, but and was quoted and they wrote articles, etc. However, following that, because they're so busy, of course, every time that person was looking to get a quote or a comment on something that was similar, they came back to me. So I think once you've set that relationship up, it will continue to give back to you. But I also love the idea that if you've done something really great, and we're just about to do a poll on this exact topic, be proactive and go straight out to these journalists, because they may well pick that up and go, oh, that's an interesting perspective, and go with it. So don't just sort of sit there and wait to have media inquiries come to you, but actually be really proactive. I love that. So and some really good tips there to go and follow Kay and PR and HR, so that you can get those ideas of topic. And it's important. And so to pick up from Kay's point, you said about awards. And so I'll pick up there and share some of my tips. And the first thing I want to say about awards is there's two things to really kind of get our heads around. First of all, is it chicken and egg? Which comes first? Is it the chicken that came first, or did the egg come first? And the reason I say that is because, do we do the great work and then we go and look for an award that we might be able to enter for that great work? Or do we look at all the awards and go, what have I got that I might be able to enter? And the answer is very similar to the chicken and egg. Actually, we kind of need to do both. First of all, I think you really have to challenge yourselves to think about the great work you're doing. And one thing, Kay and I know quite a lot about the awards sort of area. And you'd be so surprised how few people enter some of these awards. And I'm a judge on some awards, and you'd be very surprised at the poor quality of some of those entries anyway. Some of them, I start reading them and I'm like, well, this is a no, this one. Quite quickly, when I'm reading the entry, I'm like, this is not a winner. And it's from a judge's point of view, if you're judging 30 or 40 different entries, quite quickly I can get to the point where I've only got 5 or 10 entries that I think could go any further. So don't sit there and think that your great work couldn't possibly win an award, because number one, you might not be up against as many people as you think, and number two, your entry might be way higher quality than many of the people in the pile. So my advice would be enter awards. The second piece of advice I would have, and I'm going to go on to all my proper tips in a minute, is you must get over the fact that awards are not just necessarily for you. This is not about your ego. You might be a very humble person. You might not have a huge ego, and you might think, well, that's all just very backslappy and I don't really want to engage in that. This is not about you. If we go back to the beginning of this session, this is about separating yourselves from that bad media, that poor reputation that Kay referred to earlier on, and making sure that your C-suite, your CEO, your colleagues, your employees all know that your HR function is fantastic and not like the ones that they're sort of reading about in the press. So my tips for awards and getting started: number one, separate yourself and your department, and separate and start to take control of your HR reputation. The second thing I would say is have a clear strategy. And that strategy might be, I've got 3 initiatives that I really want to get awards for and raise the profile of. And therefore, we're going to have some media relationships, but we're also going to look for awards for those things. But also we might be saying, and also we are going to keep an eye on all of the different awards that are out there. And, if there are things that we think we could get, then go for it. I also would not be frightened to, if it's HR Team of the Year, and I think that's a great one, by the way, whoever that's with, whichever program that's with, go and do that. It doesn't matter if you fail or don't win the first year. It's good practice for you to write that entry. So have a strategy around what awards you're going to enter and how you're going to approach awards. Even if that is, we'd be quite happy to be shortlisted. We'd be quite happy to get some of these perhaps lower profile awards the first time, and then we'll work up to some of the higher profile ones. Build opportunities to measure your effectiveness into the start of your project lifecycle. There's nothing worse than doing an amazing piece of work and an amazing project and being super proud of it. And then you go to put it forward for awards and it says, well, the criteria, one of the questions, for example, in the entry requires certain information which you didn't capture because you didn't think about it. So look at the beginning of your project initiatives and think about what award you might enter, and just make sure you're capturing all the right information. The second, or the next thing I see a lot in award entries is they want to see how your initiatives or your projects have aligned to the company mission, vision, strategic goals, etc. And everything you do will be aligned to that in some way, shape or form. But just make sure that you are demonstrating that within your award entries. So, for example, if you're a very sustainable company and you've got this mission to be the most sustainable X, Y, or Z, or something like that, then how did this project help your organisation on that journey? That's the sort of thing someone's going to look for. The next thing is quite hard for people to tackle in their award entries, so just bear this one in mind. You need to be quite open on the organisational issue that you were solving. And that is quite uncomfortable because sometimes you have to say that something wasn't working very well in your organisation. But I just need to tell you that most awards programmes and really all awards programmes are quite confidential. They're not going to put that problem and sort of share that in media. They're only going to share the successful element, the output afterwards with everyone. They're going to say, wow, you were the best because you did X, Y, Z. They're not going to say, wow, you were crap because you started that project in this position. But in your award entry, you are going to have to be quite open about those issues that you were doing. The next thing I'm going to say, because I'm a communicator, is that storytelling is critical. I can't tell you that when I'm award judging, sometimes I literally, and I'm often doing it on a Sunday afternoon, when I've got something better to do. I have got 3 kids and all of the rest of it, but judges typically are unpaid and pretty time poor, right? Not on all, but most judges are unpaid and they're doing it for their own profiles and other things. So if I'm sat there with my head in my hands going, what are you talking about? I can't get my head around what this entry is all about, then you're likely to end up in the no pile. So get that storytelling, make it human so that I can read it and understand. If you've got lots of organisational jargon, as a judge, I do not want to hear that. I don't want to try and fathom what you're talking about. I want to be able to understand the story. So get your storytelling really right. And just remember, a judge that doesn't know your business at all is going to have to understand this quite quickly. demonstrate your meaningful impact. So they want things like quantitative, but also qualitative results. So yes, I love the percentages and KPIs and things like that, but I also want to really understand what was the meaningful impact. So if you've done something on diversity and inclusion, have you got a quote from a member of staff or something like that that said, because you did this, this meant this? You know, have you got some quote from someone who said that was the best onboarding process I'd ever been through, or whatever? That kind of little verbatim quote is also really, really good. If you're new to awards, the other piece of advice that both Kay and I came up with was lean on experts. In the UK, there's a company called Boost, and they help you not only look for awards, but they'll help you write them and things like that. It's a really great way to get your mojo and feel the confidence. If you work with someone like them, they'll go and find you awards that you'd never heard of, that they think that you could enter, and typically they will interview you around the thing, the project, the story that you want to tell, and then they will go and find you the right awards for that. So, you know, I would work with them for the first year or so, and then you might find that you feel more confident and you get on with it yourselves. And also partner with suppliers and agencies, people like Kay or I. You know, we not only are we keen to write awards, but we're quite expert in writing awards. So you can partner with your own suppliers. If you've worked with a digital partner on a new digital platform, you know, work with them. They might want to PR it with you, or work with your, you know, comms agency or someone like that. So
I was just going to say, absolutely. So I have done so many award entries for employers, but it's based on the client that I'm working with at the time. And, you know, so for instance, a technology provider, they are likely, if you say, I want to enter award because we've done such great work, I bet you they'll be happy to help you do it. And they'll do a lot of the legwork. So reach out to your partners. And it takes a lot of the aggravation away, so that it makes it easier for you.
Yeah. And so my final point on awards would probably be, remember, it's not just about you and your ego. This is about getting the credibility and respect that your department requires, and separating yourself from that bad reputation that media is doing. So we're doing well for time, but we're sort of in the last couple of slides, and this next one for me is about leveraging your internal channels, and this is about getting your internal credibility, respect, reputation, profile all in order as well. We've got that Yammer picture on there. Most of you won't be using Yammer anymore because that is an internal channel, but you will have your equivalent, your employee apps, your intranets, your internal newsletters, your town halls. You'll have so many internal channels. And this is my reminder to say, actually, are you using those channels purely to talk to employees about what a great employer you are? Or are you also remembering to use these channels to demonstrate what an awesome HR function you are? Because I think that latter bit is really critical, and we sometimes forget that. So what are my tips for leveraging your HR profile as opposed to your employer profile? First of all, get that elevator pitch right across you and your colleagues and your team. So what I mean by that is, what do we do as an HR function? What are we here for? Go and write that down, because if you don't manage your reputation and that narrative, then just like the story I shared earlier on with the marketing team, well, you're in charge of the branded merch cupboard, or you're the person who makes the flyers, or whatever it might be. You know, you manage the HR platform that never works and never seems to get my payroll right, or whatever. You know, they will make up your narrative for you if you don't decide what your narrative is. So that elevator pitch is really critical. The second thing is really talk about the impact you have versus the output that you do. And this is coming back to the stuff we do versus the difference we make. And I think I've written in here is maybe have an impact statement. And what I mean by that, and I'm just looking for where I've said that, yeah, on the next one. So what do I mean by a really successful impact statement that you can refer to? I'm going to give you an example of one from a marketing team. So they have learnt this off pat, and they've got some data to back this up. But this is something that they'll say: customers are 54% more likely to buy from us when they are marketing engaged, and they spend at 22% higher deal rates. Now that is what I call an impact statement. So if anyone says, well, what's the point of your department? And you know, what is the contribution you make? You create your own impact statement. And if you think about what I've just said, it could be that the HR version of that is that, you know, if we get our employee experience right, our employees are X% stay with us longer. You know, we are making a fairer, healthier and happier workplace, which makes this much difference, or whatever it might be. What is the difference that you are making? Because that's another sentence that if you learn it, you write it, you go and find the data for it, and you learn it and you write it and put it on a post-it note. It's the thing you need to say when you really wished that you were on the spot, and you really wished later on that you had said it, but you hadn't planned it, so you didn't say it. I hate it when you come away from a conversation and you go, oh, I wish I'd said X, Y, and Z, because that's what we're so good at doing. Anyway, so have an impact statement. I think also know your North Star for the year and refer to it consistently. And what I mean by that is this year in the business, we are particularly focused on A, B, and C, you know, or whatever it might be, A or B, or whatever. But that is a really good sentence also to know, is what are we really trying? What is the biggest problem we're trying to do this year? This year, we might be trying to digitize our XYZ, or we might be trying to, you know, increase our retention so that we can improve our skills in the business, or we might be trying to focus on our managers. Someone gave me a thing earlier on about making managers into leaders. You know, this year we're really specifically supporting our managers to become leaders, or something like that. Now, this was something I referred to a little bit earlier on, but map your stakeholders and know your detractors from your advocates. So this is something that this is the ugly problem we have to possibly talk about in large organizations. But you have got people out there who, you know, they get it. They know that you know that they'll support you. You know you're going to have good conversations with them, and you'll gravitate towards them because they're always really good, right? But there are also some tricky characters, the ones that don't get what you do, that don't value your expertise, that perhaps whenever you ask for something to be done, they're the ones that are the last to do it, and you know you have to nag them. Sometimes they're the ones that refer to you in a bit more of a, not you personally necessarily, but the HR function. They might refer to the HR function in a less respectful way. I think it's really important that you map your stakeholders and you know those detractors and you start to work with them, because they are causing a ripple impact with other people. They're talking about you when you're not there, and you've got to get them under control, and you have got to get the reputation mended with those people, no matter how difficult it is. And typically we avoid them because they don't have nice conversations with us, and then they don't like to engage with us, so we let them avoid us, and that's a problem. Simplify your jargon and become storytellers. And you know, I've sat in board meetings where HR people have presented some fantastic data, but the jargon has gone straight over a lot of people's heads. You know, and the same happens with marketing. You know, don't start referring to click-through rates and absenteeism rates and this rate and that rate, because it doesn't help people to engage with your stories. So you need to bring it to life. You know, if you've got a digitized journey and you've noticed that you've made a real difference with people's onboarding experience, then talk about it in human language. language that anyone can understand. And if you want to test that, go home to your partners who perhaps don't understand your worlds, or your parents or somebody else, and just say, if I said this to you, what would that mean? And if they go, I don't know what you're talking about, then go back to the drawing board and make it simpler. Because for sure, your job is to educate the people in the wider business. You're not educating them if you're desperately trying to get them to understand a piece of jargon that doesn't actually matter to them. Take every opportunity to educate. And my phrase that I use a lot with people I work with is bite-sized everyday education. That could be in an email, that could be in a town hall, that could be in a meeting. It does not have to be, you can make little videos these days that just present a bit of information to someone and say, oh, I'm just sharing this little video because we've had some great success on an initiative and I just wanted to share it with you. And you make it into a little video where you're human telling a story. But do make sure you understand your job is to take people on a journey of education. Because you as HR leaders are also on a journey of education, because HR is changing. So don't expect everyone else to keep up if you're struggling to keep up. So keep education, bite-sized everyday education. Be clear on business cases. I have taught my whole team here about business cases. I've simplified it. I've showed them, what do I mean by a business case? What's the impact? How does it align with the strategic narrative and objectives of our business? I'm a massive fan of put a post-it note on your screen and remember every single time. So if I am talking in a board meeting or any meeting with a stakeholder, what is my business case for doing this? What's the impact I'm going to have on the business, and how does that align with what our business is trying to achieve? I know a company that just to stand still every year, they have to recruit 120,000 employees every year around the world, just to stand still. And this is in a backdrop of a reducing workplace of workforce of people to go and recruit. So we're just making a really difficult job more difficult. So a really easy way to show the business case of something in that organization is if we can retain some of the employees that are leaving that business, then we are chipping away at that cost, that's the enormous cost that it is costing to recruit that number of people. And the last thing on here, and I guarantee none of you are doing it, but it's such a simple thing to do, is to have a comms plan for yourselves that you have scheduled with the content channels that you have available to you, and say to yourself, it doesn't matter if it's a piece of paper on your notice board that says, actually, these are the things I want to talk about at these times through these channels to these people. That's what a comms plan is. And HR professionals won't have that because they're so busy talking to employees that they forget to have a comms plan for their own HR strategic narrative. And I know that sounds like a lot of work for people who've already got a lot of work, but you need to remind yourselves that doing these things are going to be the things that help you to get more resources, bigger teams, more budgets, and more respect for the work that you do. And that's the journey that you're on. And it's not just the HR leaders that are on this call, it is HR leaders globally in every organization, because that's the narrative that Kay shared